I am ready. We are ready. At long last, I would like to call to order the meeting of the Audiology Practice Committee of the Speech Language Pathology Audiology and Hearing Aid Dispenser Board. I would like to begin to calling roll call for members of the committee only, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Members of the committee. Oh, bring it.
Marcia Raggio, audiologist, committee member.
Dee Parker, speech pathologist, committee member.
Allison Grimes, audiologist, committee member.
Kelsey Pruden, DCA legal counsel.
Paul Sanchez, Executive Officer of the Board.
And members of the public may introduce themselves but are not obligated to introduce themselves.
Vanessa Kahina on behalf of the hearing healthcare providers in California.
I'm Chalet, board member, hearing aid dispenser.
Debbie Snow, board member, public member.
Anita Joseph, board staff.
Karen Robinson, board staff.
Brianne Humphreys, board staff.
Tony Burian, consumer on behalf of HLAA.
Thank you. Okay, I would like to move to tab number 2, review and approval of the August 11th, 2016 committee meeting minutes. Are there comments? And I have a question on the committee meeting minutes draft. There are only the 3 of us on this committee, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, good. And I had no other comments. Marcia? Dee? Okay, good. I'm sorry? Oh, yeah, is there any public comment or question on the committee meeting minutes from August 11th? Hearing none. We just did that one. Yeah. Okay, good. We need to, is there a motion to approve those committee meeting minutes?
So moved.
Dee moved and Marcia seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. I'm sorry, roll call.
Oh, roll call, yes, that's right. Dee.
Aye.
Dee says aye.
Aye.
Marcia says aye. Allison says aye. The motion carries. At this time, item number 3 on the agenda is public comment for items not on the agenda. And again, we may hear new concerns or questions raised. We will not discuss them at this meeting because they're not agendized, and we will determine whether to place any matters on the agenda of a future meeting. From the board first, is there anything that the committee would like to bring to itself in a future meeting?
We'll all be discussing another issue in
Okay.
the board. So
All right, so Marcia, no. Dee, no. Anybody from the public have another item that they would like to bring to this committee in the future? Hearing none.
Or just public comments. It doesn't have to be.
Public comments in
Agenda item.
general, you can say anything you'd like within reason. Hearing nothing, which may be a reflection of my hearing. Just kidding. Okay, let's move to item number, it's been a long day already. We're just starting. Okay, let's move to item number 4, discussion and possible recommendation to the full board regarding CPD requirements for dispensing audiologists in the California Code of Regulations. And we have some background material. We don't.
We do.
We don't.
Then tab 4.
It's this.
It's the letter from Margaret.
Yeah,
The letter.
Right, I know it's here because I read, the letter from Margaret Winter to me. So nice. So this is under tab 4, thank you. And the copies of this letter, I believe, are available on the table. If anybody's interested, you're welcome to pick one up. This is a letter that was addressed to me by my friend and colleague Margaret Winter at USC. And this letter outlines her concerns, and I know that her concerns are shared by many, and in fact, I share many of her concerns as well, as I would guess that you too might, about the challenges of our current regulations for continuing professional development for dispensing audiologists. The regulations for the CPD that dispensing audiologists must achieve every year are rather stringently, what's the word I want to say? They're like narrowed down to very, very small bits and pieces, and the CPD has to fit into those bits and pieces. So half of the CPD for a dispensing audiologist must be in the field of audiology, and half of the CPD for dispensing audiologists must be in hearing aid dispensing, and the hours for hearing aid dispensing must not be continuing professional development that is designed to train a dispensing audiologist in how to fit and sell a particular manufacturer's specific brand of hearing aid. Margaret raises many good points. Among those, she believes that these requirements don't meet the goals of advanced education. She believes that there are few options available, and her opinion is that approved courses are often not valuable. She points out that marketing techniques have no business being labeled advanced education, which indeed is what our regulations attempt to get at. She believes that there is not enough new information about hearing aid research and development to warrant 6 continuing education units. And she asks that this committee and this board re-examine these rather stringent and prescribed regulations for how we achieve our continuing professional development. So with that being said, and the continuing education requirements are in the board book for our edification. So, can we discuss Margaret's letter and the bigger question of our continuing education or continuing professional development, and whether we believe that we should recommend to the full board that we re-examine how these regulations put limits and requirements on dispensing audiologists?
I'm not sure that I'm totally against changing the regulations, but I do want to take issue with the notion that that courses that are not market-driven or product-driven are not available. I believe that the American Academy of Audiology offers some excellent courses in hearing aid technology that are not promoting a particular product. I know from personal experience that the California Academy of Audiology offers exactly in excess of the number of CEUs needed every year that are non-product related, but yet talk about the latest aspects of hearing aid technology and digital processing, signal processing, and so on. So I take issue right off the bat that that isn't available. I believe it is.
I'll pass this to you in one moment, I promise. I agree with you, Marcia. As a clinic director, I would have to say that the cost of attending meetings in today's economic climate has become prohibitive.
Is that her argument?
No, that's my argument.
Yeah, that's a different argument.
It is a different argument. I agree. Yes, if one is able to jump on a plane and go someplace, yes, these courses are available.
She's not arguing that it's tedious and expensive. What
Might-
she's saying is she's
You might
having.
need to use the microphone for the.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
She's saying that it costs a lot of money to learn about a minor thing, and she doesn't think that expenditure is worth it. But that's a different issue about whether how expensive it is to seek CEUs. I'm not arguing that point either. I think that with our potentially upcoming changes in the CEU requirements, allowing people to get 50% of their hours through online presentations, I think that will help a great deal with that. But my point is that these are available, and I don't know what the participation is in these annual, state and national conferences, but people go, and they can get those hours.
Actually, Marcia, you just answered my two questions here. One, is it available for the people to get that type of coursework? And you just said through either AAA or through CAA, they are getting them. And I agree with what you also said, Allison, that my concern was, could they do this and they can't?
I guess I'm not convinced either on the basis of one letter about someone complaining about this, that everybody feels this way. They may all feel this way, I just don't know. And I wouldn't change anything based on a single complaint.
I think that's a good point. I would bet that I feel from talking with colleagues that this is a significant concern. I think I encouraged Margaret to write the letter because we had this conversation again and again, and finally I encouraged her to just really bring it to the, in the format of a formal letter to the board. I think that maybe there's even a bigger discussion that we need to look at dispensing audiology hours. Some of the concerns that she's raised here, this very sort of proscriptive, well, half has to be hearing aids, half has to be audiology. What do we do with a hybrid cochlear implant? It's a hearing aid and a cochlear implant. Do you put those in hearing aid hours or do you put those in audiology hours? So that bright line, I think, it becomes a little bit blurry when you're looking at the broad range of assistive technologies. Why do I'm a dispensing audiologist, why do we have a 1-year renewal cycle and other professionals on our board have a 2-year renewal cycle? I think that this might be a time to really look at what are we trying to accomplish and how can we accomplish this in ways that meet the needs of the consumers, that consumers are protected by having practitioners who are knowledgeable about current practice, and yet at the same time that audiologists don't tie themselves up in knots. I think that I and a lot of audiologists that I know get way too many hours. And it's not too many, but we get hours in excess of what's required for fear that somehow, if there's an audit, that we'll have like extra hours in the bank. Oh, those don't count for that? Well, I thought they did, but here, use these hours instead. So I think it's a good time to sort of look at some of our fundamental questions of what are we trying to achieve here, and is this very sort of rigid procedure the best way to get at consumer protection?
Well, I was on the board when we changed this, and you were one of the leading proponents. So we have to ask, were your concerns no longer concerns?
Maybe I've just grown up. I think in a perfect world, what I was trying to get at was that we shouldn't be counting we shouldn't be counting marketing and advertising as continuing education. I still believe that to be true. But I also believe that we perhaps need to be a little bit more open-minded about, there probably isn't really a bright line between what is do this to fit this hearing aid and this hearing aid uses signal processing that has these advantages in terms of understanding speech and noise. I do remember this discussion, and I know that was, I thought that was a really good idea at the time. I just think that the way that it's played out in licensees' lives, it's just been very, very hard to achieve what it was that we were trying to get at.
Well, I'm thinking, if there's a concern that there's not enough courses out there, maybe we could come back to another committee meeting and present you with the types of courses that are available. We approve courses, so we approve individual courses. A lot of these courses are from hearing aid manufacturers. So that's something that I could offer, is come back to another meeting and bring that information to the meeting. Tomorrow, I hope to be able to give the full board an overview of our continuing education, continuing professional development requirements. So the board has an idea of what licensees have to try to understand as far as what the requirements are, especially on the speech language pathology and audiology side. So I think we all understand the reason behind this regulation, and I think it's really clear. So perhaps if we had some more information, this committee could decide if there's any action that needs to be taken.
I'd like to see that information, but I'd also like to get some idea of how many people are feeling the way Margaret feels. I'm not exactly sure how to do that, whether the professional associations can do some sort of survey monkey, get some idea of how unique this is or how common it is.
Yeah.
And that might give us some better idea of which way to go. I guess I'm just not convinced. I understand why you pushed hard in the beginning because it felt like CEUs were marketing. We were getting information about how to fit and sell a particular product. Well, we do fit and sell particular products, and we have our biases. Is that so bad, to be trained on that if that's the way we're going to go? And I think I felt that way at the time, but I understood how you felt, that it didn't feel as professional getting our information that way, so I supported it at the time. So I'm not against this changing in some way. I guess I have to be convinced on a couple levels that there's a need.
Okay, so that sounds like a good plan. If you can bring information back and.
So is there a motion to direct staff to?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Motion to direct staff to research the information
Yes.
and bring it back to the committee at a later date.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to direct Paul to get more information. I make that motion all the time.
Second.
There's a second to that motion by Dee. Is there any further discussion? Paul, do you have a pretty clear idea of what we're asking you to do?
Yes.
That's good. I'm not sure I do, but I'm glad you do.
I think I want the committee to at least understand what courses are available out there. I mean, spend a lot of resources and a lot of time approving courses. So I know that there's a lot of course approval going on, and I can look on our website right now and I see a list of courses. So I'd probably also want to know, what courses are available and which of these are not meeting the needs of audiologists that are out there. So I could also better understand the issue.
Thank you. And just as a point of clarification, the approved courses, you're doing that for hearing aid dispensers or dispensing audiologists or both?
So dispensing audiologists are required. Courses must be provided by approved providers. When they are provided by a manufacturer, the courses must be approved by the board. So if an audiologist is taking a manufacturer-provided course, it's a course that's approved by the board. So I could at least get an idea of what's out there. I know we talked to some other people that are course providers. I'd like to take a stab at finding out what's out there and what's available.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Any public comment?
Oh, I'm sorry, comment from the public?
Am I allowed to comment?
Wait,
Am I allowed to comment?
I would recommend you to comment when they make their recommendation to the full board, which they will do.
So I'm not gonna comment that I agree with the letter.
well done. Is there any other comment from members of the public? Now, it is, what's that? Have I broken something wrong? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Roll call.
Oh, yeah, roll call.
Aye.
It used to be so much simpler.
Okay, Dee says aye. Aye. Marcia says aye. Allison says aye. The motion carries. Okay, let's move to item number 5, which is discussion and possible recommendations to the board regarding communications with California Children's Services. So there are 3 points that are listed here in the agenda. First, risks to consumers due to CCS program delays, and I might add the word disorganization. Number 2,
Can't change the agenda.
Can't change the agenda. That was an editorial aside. I didn't change the agenda. Item number 2, cochlear implant requirements and authorization delays and confusion. That was an editorial comment. And then number 3, shortage of pediatric audiologists. So we've been talking about this for a substantial period of time. We know that California Children's Services is an extraordinarily important program for providing healthcare services to low-income children in California, and it is estimated that 50% of children in California with disabilities that qualify them are covered by CCS. There are significant delays in all aspects of the CCS program, from initiating coverage to getting authorization to paying the provider. And for a child who is hard of hearing or deaf, a delay of services is literally a denial of adequate and appropriate early intervention. You can't make it up. If it's delayed, it's going to have long-term impact on the child. We have a new issue with CCS that has developed relatively recently statewide, which is that the electronically based reporting system for newborn hearing screening that is used in every hospital in the state was very abruptly taken offline on December 1st, apparently because of a contractual issue. So now every hospital in the state is manually writing their hearing screening results and faxing their results in. There are 500,000 babies born in California every year. So this is a big deal. It's been painfully slow to even get information from CCS about when the automated system might come back online. There is, among audiologists who work with children in the CCS program and who work in cochlear implant centers, significant confusion about the criteria for implantation, the requirements for implantation for deaf and hard of hearing children who are covered by CCS. I don't know how to fix this, and I would be interested in hearing from members of the public and other members of the committee about how we can move forward with this.
I know Paul has made more than one attempt to make contact with him and set up discussions. A couple of discussions were had, as far as I know, with you and Becky Gunier and the Mr. Rico, is that his name? Yeah, some time ago, that nothing came of that. So I, wearing a different hat, spoke with Barry Brokaw, who feels he has some very strong connections with the appropriate people at the Department of Healthcare Services and CCS in particular, and he would be happy to set up any kind of communication and he would be happy to set up any kind of meetings or anything we'd like to do at whatever time we'd like to do it. So I'm happy to wear another hat, pursue that.
That would be great. And now we know what Barry can do and how much he really does care about hearing health throughout the state of California. So
I will say, in just 1 second, that Margaret Winter, again, and I did have a meeting with the medical director of CCS here in Sacramento a few months ago. And we went over a bunch of stuff, and it was a very agreeable and kumbaya kind of a meeting. But I don't see, and unfortunately this is kind of, I feel this is a bit of a pattern that will take one step forward and 1 or 2 steps back. And this has been, just to put this in perspective, I've been a CCS provider on and off since 1976. These are not new problems. These are entrenched. They're baked into the culture. Yeah, 40 years. We'll keep working at it. Please go ahead, and can you come up and take the microphone?
Vanessa Kahina for HHP. I would support what Board Member Raggio indicated about having CAA inquire with the Department of Healthcare Services about what the next steps are. We have a very small number of HHP members who are CCS providers, but they're committed to the program. And we would be happy to do any work with you in coalition, as well as maybe bringing some other folks into this, perhaps the developmental community. My background previous to this was entirely in Medi-Cal, so we're happy to make whatever steps we can on this.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Are there other comments, questions from members of the public? Either of you guys?
Is there the motion then to direct or to delegate to Marcia the
Yes.
authority to contact the
Mr. Brokaw?
Mr.
Yeah, okay.
and
Yes.
facilitate that? Sorry.
Would you mind repeating that?
I move that my friend Marcia contact Barry Brokaw with California Academy of Audiology and see to investigate what kinds of inroads he can make on behalf of the CAA with CCS.
second.
Thank you. More comments?
I'm just curious, Paul, how much you want to be involved in that, or I think you should be involved in it.
I'd be happy to participate.
Okay, so I should have perhaps get Barry in touch with you when he
Sure.
starts that process, so that you can be involved from the start.
Absolutely.
And I would, so just to make sure that the motion is clear, this is all on behalf of the board as a whole. So this will be the recommendation to the full board, but that this comes as from the full board, right?
Yep. Okay, so for the purposes of our motion, it's been moved and seconded that we communicate to the full board the intent of having asking Marcia to work with Barry and Paul to make contact again with Department of Healthcare Services. Roll call vote.
Yes.
Yes. And yes, the motion carries. And that is the end of the Audiology Practice Committee meeting. We will move now to the full board meeting.
Yes, green.
Which of the,
Oh, I'm sorry.
you're just, so you're adjourning the committee?
I'm adjourning the committee meeting and initiating the full board meeting. Turn around your name.
Yes.
This will be-
But, you can say it as one.
Yes.
That only knows it does the room and the restroom
And goes down.
and will not have it on, so just be mindful of that.
So you wanted me to announce that people should go to the bathroom now before we start the board meeting?
If that's how you choose, Madam Chair.
Okay, I would like to call to order the meeting of the Speech Language Pathology Audiology and Hearing Aid Dispenser Board. And I'd like to start with a roll call.
Deborah Snow, public member.
Deborah Snow, public member,
Nonchalant, board member, hearing aid dispenser.
and Angela, board member, hearing aid dispenser.
Kelsey Pruden, DCA Legal.
Kelsey Cruden, DCA Legal.
Paul Sanchez, executive officer.
Allison Grimes, audiologist, board chair.
Marcia Raggio, audiologist, board member.
Dee Parker, speech pathologist, board member.
And members of the public may but are not obligated to introduce themselves.
Brianne Humphries, staff member. Vanessa Kahina for HHP.
Anita Joseph, staff member.
Karen Robinson, board staff.
Tony Ferriant, consumer and representative of the Hearing Loss Association of America.
Thank you, and a quorum is established and nobody can leave the room, the door is locked.
No board members.
No board member, yeah, everybody else can leave the room, but the board members can't. Let's begin with, is there any public comment for any item that is not on the agenda? Hearing none, we will move to review and approval of the November and December board meeting minutes. Under tab 3 is the board meeting minute draft for November 3rd, 4th, 2016. Are there edits to these board meeting minutes? I have an edit on page 4, not an edit, I have a question on page 4. Second paragraph, maybe it's just my confusion. I'm not exactly sure what this means. The hearing aid dispenser advertising regulation will be reviewed by Ms. Pruden to locate First Amendment violations and will be brought back to the board for approval.
We will be discussing that.
Thank you. Okay, so that will be clarified.
Yes, we had a conversation. We had a conversation, and I had just brought up that there were some issues, and that we were. I was working with staff to get that language legally sufficient. So, and it is being brought to the full board today or tomorrow.
Thanks. On that same page, under item number E, I would suggest we use the word number and not amount of complaints. I have no other questions or edits for these board meeting minutes, and I can do one motion to approve all 3 groups of board meeting minutes, or do you want one by one?
I would recommend, because Marcia was not at the last one, she will need to recuse herself, and that also means that you don't have a quorum.
Yeah.
So you can accept those minutes, not approve
Okay.
them.
Okay.
So you can choose to do the first 2 as one, since all of you were present at those board meetings, and then maybe entertain a motion to accept
The
the
third.
third minute, please.
Remind me to make that motion after
Okay.
we do the next one. Okay. Board meeting minutes from November 17th teleconference. I have no edits. Does anybody else?
I don't, I'm sorry, I'm back at the other minutes. I was just reading them there
Which other minutes?
again.
Oh, the ones that
November
we
3rd and
just-
4th.
Oh,
There's 2 facts in this that I don't think I said. I'm looking at item number update on AB 2317,
On page,
page 5 of the November 3rd, 4th. It says the California University's chancellor will be putting together a task force to develop a standardized curriculum for the CSU programs. I did not say that, and that there is no standardized program being developed. Everybody is developing their own curriculum. They do have to meet certain other kind of state educational requirements, but not the curriculum itself. So that's not the case. It says the time frame of the program's beginning is unknown. However, the programs with resources will start in the fall of 2018. Nobody is prepared for 2017.
thank you, those are important edits. I was impressed that we were starting in the fall of 2017. Okay, so is there I'd like to hear a motion to adopt, accept, approve the meeting minutes for those first 2 dates.
With edits.
I'm sorry,
With the edits.
with the edits as discussed. Amnon moves, is there a second?
Second.
D, roll call,
Public
is there further discussion? Okay, D,
Public comment.
I'm sorry.
Did you public
She's
comment?
getting comment from, so.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were doing a roll call.
I was doing a roll call. Oh, is there public comment on these 2 sets of board meeting minutes that we have just gone through edits for? Hearing none, I will now call for the vote.
Yes.
D is aye.
Are we talking about the December also?
No,
not yet.
Okay,
We're going to do that next.
Okay, then aye.
No, the only one we haven't gone over. Yeah. I vote aye.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. And now we will look at the teleconference board meeting minutes draft from December 16th, 2016. Are there edits to these minutes?
I really ought to opt
We're
in.
having problems with people.
Oh,
I
excited.
took you seriously.
Okay then. Are there any comments from members of the public? Oh, okay.
I don't remember.
Can we pass this down now?
I don't recall if in the closed session I was excused or not. Is there any remarks on this before? Do you know who was
For the closed
session?
You're not indicated as having not been in the closed session, and you were.
Oh, yeah,
And that
present.
information is not public,
Yeah.
but that's fine, it's fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
now I remember about Manning last meeting, so okay, I recall it. Okay, so I moved to
Accept.
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 Oh, to accept this.
Yeah.
I moved to accept.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. And roll call D. Marcia?
You may
You can vote to accept.
Yes, for the
Oh,
accept.
to accept. Okay.
Aye.
We need you.
I
Okay, that motion carries. They are accepted.
Kelsey, can I just ask a question? If you approve and not accept, do you have to then later go back and accept at some later
The other
meeting?
way around.
Or the other way around?
You know what, I'd have to, this is more Robert's Rules of Order, which I'm not, totally familiar with, but so I would have to get back to you on that. But I can bring, if we do need to come back and approve it at another meeting, I will research that and
Okay, I'm just curious.
Okay.
Okay, item number 4, the executive officer's report.
So behind tab number 4, you have the board staff's report. Just a few things to highlight.
Wait, I'm sorry, I need to be in the right.
This would be
This is 4A.
4A,
Thank
yes.
you, okay.
So, during the past quarter, we are still trying to stay fully staffed. We recently hired another licensing analyst. As you recall, we increased our staffing by one position to help us in the area of licensing. Unfortunately, we lost a staff member. Francisco Del Pozo transferred to another department, and he actually was seeking a promotion, and we congratulate him on that. But that left us without a staff person. And just recently, actually just this week, Nugget left us, and she's gone on to figure things. So we're very happy for our staff. We're very proud of them, but that leaves us with some gaps, and we are in the process of filling vacancies for a licensing analyst and for that administrative support person. At any time, if anyone has any questions, feel free to just ask.
Is there something endemic to our board, and I'm thinking really of probably salaries, but maybe working conditions? I don't know. It feels like, I don't mean to be unkind, but we have some great people who all of a sudden are gone. I mean, I just met Francisco for the first time at the last meeting, and he's gone. So
I can answer that.
I'm sure you can.
If our potlucks are any indication of our success, then that wouldn't be the issue. I think what happens is I think what happens, you'll get invitations to the next one, but what happens is when you have staffing, you develop people. A lot of times working at a board, and I've worked in several different state government agencies, and what makes working for a board unique is that you become, you're a specialist, but you're also a generalist. Typically in state government, you're either a generalist or you're a specialist. Well, people in our office are trained, they become very skilled at doing many things. I mean, just Nugget alone, we were talking the other day at all the things that she learned. She called our office a state employee boot camp because you come in there and, we work hard. And, just the staff that are here, I mean, Karen helps us with board preparation, she handles enforcement, and she also handles regulations. Anita does coordination, has to become well versed in the Administrative Procedures Act and negotiates settlements with deputy attorney generals. I mean, on and on I can go on, and having worked there, I've seen that it's not unusual to see people move around. We're part of one of the largest employers in the country, in the state of California. So there are lots of great opportunities. I think it's probably just part of doing business. We are fortunate. Again, my experience in working throughout state government, I think we're very fortunate in that, and there's probably one of my staff members calling right there. We're very fortunate in that we are able to hire some really good people, and I think we're very proud of that. So, kind of to put a positive spin on this, I think that we have done a really good job in developing staff. We recently had a seasonal clerk. A seasonal clerk is someone that isn't even a permanent position. It's a temporary position. We had two actually. A seasonal clerk who's gone from a seasonal clerk to a office support staff to an analyst position. An analyst is a very deep class, usually requires a college degree, but our staff has done a really good job in developing people. Tim has done a great job holding down the fort for licensing. He's training people. I expect to see people develop and people move on, but I'm obviously very biased, but our office is a very positive place to work. And we're actually working on an employee survey, and that's something that I think is very important to do, to kind of do a full circle and just kind of know what is important to staff. Typically, the things that we would generally think are important are probably not as important, and the things that we wouldn't think are. Some of the things that are important to staff are communication, training, being equipped to do their job, seeing a connection between what they do and the mission of the organization. So those are things that we try to focus on. That's what we're going to continue to do. Any other questions? Yes.
I would just like to say that makes me really happy to hear you say that, and it sounds like a very positive environment. And I was only joking. No, I appreciate the fact that you've got a great staff and that you're interested in developing people to move on. It's just that moving on part is just kind of hard to handle. Yeah.
I just wanted to say what I wrote down when I read this, and I wrote the word incubator. I just think that it indicated, from my point of view, you do a fabulous job in developing people and having them go to the next level. So that was my word.
Thank you, and as you can imagine, I'm very sensitive about losing these staff members because they've done an
absolutely.
excellent job. So, going on to our board budget, that's behind tab 4B, and I'll kind of go back and forth like I always do, but at the outset you can see that we are projected to have a deficit right now, and the reason for that is because we tend to overspend in enforcement. What that means is that we are actually doing a lot of work in enforcement. Enforcement costs include the cost of the investigation. It includes the cost of, actually issuing the work out to the Division of Investigation, subject matter experts. We work with the Attorney General's office. So all of that adds up, and we typically have had a deficit there, and what we need to do probably in the future is look at a budget change proposal. We've had some pretty unusual cases that have taken up a lot of resources. Some of those accusations have been filed, they're public documents, and those cases have been very costly to the board, but we have to fulfill our mission of consumer protection, so we will pursue those cases. And what we've done to alleviate that is we have a healthy fund. So we go to the Department of Finance and we do a request to augment our budget. We did it last year, and we'll be doing it again this year. And we're probably looking, if you look, I know this is kind of hard for some people to read, but if you look at the very bottom of the document, there's a section called enforcement. And at the very last column, it's the third to the last bottom row, and the very last column you can see the negative numbers. Those are the amounts that we are overspending. In state budgets, it goes down to the bottom line. So if you look at the net appropriation, we're about $30,000 in the red right now, and we'll be getting the budget augmentation that will help us in that area. We're also doing some exam development. We have to do an occupational analysis. That's something else that we typically do periodically for all the professions, and we're going to be looking at audiology this year. We recently, I think a few years back, we looked at hearing aid dispensing. A couple years ago, we looked at speech language pathology. Now we're going to do our due diligence and look at audiology. Any questions on the budget? Yes, Emma.
What's the percentage of cost recovery from our investigation that we get at the end? I see that all the cases, most of them, they pay for the cost of the investigation. I mean, are we getting substantial amount of money back, or?
I can answer that question. Kelsey probably has a legal perspective on this too, even though she doesn't necessarily work on the enforcement side of what the board does. But when you look at enforcement, I think you have to look at it, so you're not going to break even. Enforcement costs are usually not something that you're even going to break even in. When you actually get to the highest level of discipline, which is seeking revocation through an accusation, probation, all those things before an administrative law judge. An administrative law judge is not going to give you 100% cost recovery. So if you spent, say, $30,000 or $50,000 on a case, they have certain criteria by which they're rewarded. Sometimes it's half. You get half cost recovery back. Sometimes you get 2/3. Sometimes even a third. It all depends. And then actually recovering those costs is another story. If you're successful in revoking a license, you may never see that cost recovery. And we consider that the cost of doing business because our mandate is consumer protection. And even when we're negotiating settlements, cost is a factor. but it's not the greatest factor. Discipline is usually the greatest factor, making sure that rehabilitation is possible, and making sure that that person's compliant with the laws, and again, foremost, consumer protection, that's what we're looking at. Yes.
I appreciate the fact that we are overspending in enforcement. I view that as being a good thing, and if we were underspending, that would be a concern. So thank you for pursuing all of that, and for looking at getting more money to do fundamentally what is probably the most important job of this board.
Thank you. Before we move forward, do we need to have Patty introduce herself?
Yeah, she probably. Do you remember what her name is?
Hi, I'm Patty Solomon Rice, speech language pathologist whose flight was delayed 4.5 hours.
Welcome. Glad you're here.
Thank you, Patty. We're glad to see you. I was going over the budget.
Yes.
We were just talking about enforcement costs, and that's a great question. That's a question that we get a lot, and it's something that I think it's really important for the board to understand. There's also restitution. That's another important part of costs for enforcement. Sometimes we don't just look for cost recovery. Sometimes we look for restitution. Sometimes we look for fines or penalties. But the cost recovery issue is obviously you're asking because those are resources that we spend, and we do try to get some of that money back. When it comes to just another FYI, when it comes to citations, those things that aren't recoverable, we actually use something called the Franchise Tax Board Intercept Program. Sometimes if you're dealing with an unlicensed person, you don't really have jurisdiction over that person. So you may cite that person. You may cite them for $500 or $1,000. Well, if that person does not pay us, then we will seek that money through the Franchise Tax Board Intercept Program. That's just kind of an FYI. So if you go to the second page behind 4B, as we go into our sunset review, there's always discussions on the board's fund and how the board spends its money, and we look at something called a fund condition. It's a pretty basic balance sheet. At the top of the page, there's a section that shows your beginning balances for a particular year. The second row is revenue and transfers, but the bottom line is that section that says total revenues. So we typically, if you look at 2015-16, we brought in $1.9 million, 1.966 actually, and we are projected, or actually, for 2016-17 it was 1.917. The reason for the variation in the revenue is because the majority of our licensees renew every other year. So you may have a high year and a low year for revenue. They don't really vary a whole lot, but there is usually some variance of renewal fees. But that number continues to rise as our population, our licensing population grows.
But the total revenues have declined from 15-16 to budget year 18-19.
And I will explain that.
Thank you.
If you look at the only 2 years that actually matter on this sheet are the first 2 years, 2015-16 and 2016-17. 2015-16 is the actual number that came in as of June 30th of 2016. 2016-17 and on are projected. So we tend to be conservative when we project our revenue because we don't want to over-project and then come up short. So we will tend to be conservative there, but we are pretty close. If you look at, so that's your total resources. Your total resources are right about $2 million a year, a little over $2 million. And then our expenditures are right about the same amount. There's a slight imbalance because we're spending more money. We're budgeted to spend more money than what we brought in the last couple of years. that's why we look at things such as a fee increase when it comes to expenses, especially if we want to increase staff down the road. So that's something that we'll be talking more about.
Thank you. I'm not sure because the lines are so small. Is that 450 a loan repay or transfer from hearing aid dispenser? Looks like it's a loan repay. Is that what that is, the 450 on the
Yes.
actual?
Yes, that's correct. I'm not sure what that other line means there, but that is the last of the general fund
Okay.
loan that was repaid in 15-16. So if you took that, and that's a very important number to look at, because if you look at the second column budget act of 2016-17, we are projected to bring in about 1.9 in revenue. We're projected to spend about $2 million. Now, I happen to know that that number is probably going to be a little higher, and it's probably going to be equal to the amount that we spend. But we're cutting it really close there, especially if we want to increase our budget to have sufficient resources. So that's something that we are watching closely. Yes, I'm not.
Revenue. Does revenues in this page include the cost recovery of cases?
Yes, it does.
Where here? Which item?
You know, it may be in one of these other categories, but I know that it's part of our revenue because that's.
It should be, because you have here income. Quite.
No. I can
Like you have an item, they took the time and the place to put an item sales of documents, and which is pennies. I don't know, and not cost recovery should be an item there.
Right. And I know that this question has come up. When you look at this balance sheet, it's very high level. For instance, a lot of times when we're doing a sunset review, they look at these numbers, and the numbers on the bottom don't always match the numbers on the top, because every year in budgets they make an adjustment to reflect that additional income that comes in. But it's a relatively small number in comparison to renewals and some of those other things. It may actually be within these numbers. I could find that out though. Yes, Marcia.
I'm not sure if I remember this right, but it seemed like in 2015 you mentioned the fee increase and the regulatory changes and all that took. It was time consuming, but I'm just wondering if that time is growing close where the fees will be increased, or are you still in some sort of paperwork situation?
I think in order to increase the fees, we are having to do probably more of a fee audit in the future to make sure that it gets through the whole regulatory process. They have, they're requiring, they meaning the Office of Administrative Law, is requiring more information and justifying these fee increases. So even though it may be very obvious to us that the fees need to increase, we have to do more background work to make that happen. The good news is that there isn't an urgent need for this money right now, but in the future as we grow, there will be. For instance, had we been approved for the budget change proposals that we requested, there would be more of an urgency to get this done. So these things will probably happen somewhat simultaneously. Okay, if you go to page 2, those are just some of we're talking about our licensing timeframes. And now I'm on page 2 back to my memo.
Are you under tab 4C?
Under tab 4A.
Okay, I'm focusing on
I think I'm just going to compile all this into one document. There we go.
second page of tab
Yes.
4A. Okay, gotcha.
And again, what I've tried to do is keep you informed as to what our licensing cycle times are. And you can see a year's worth of quarterly cycle times. We are right about 2 weeks out right now, and a lot of that is, we're hurting a little bit because of the vacancy, but staff are continuing to work on this. Tomorrow we're going to talk about continuing education, and you'll find out how this maybe affects our audits. So we've worked really hard to stay caught up in licensing, and I do think that's a priority. I think that's important. But we also, once we get our other staff person, we're going to be working on CE audits. Yes.
I'd like to commend Paul and staff for the nice decrease in the timeline for issuing licenses. So thank you. I think we're all noticing, and certainly, other professionals that I talk with, people are noticing that it's moving more quickly, which is awesome.
Good, thank you. We just recently conducted a practical examination just last weekend, and I believe that's the second exam that we've done this year.
First.
It's the first one this calendar year, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I think we're seeing some pretty positive changes. Once we compile information, we'll be able to report to the board more how the changes have affected some of the outcomes that we've had as a result of actually making changes to the practical exam. Enforcement, just an FYI, just so you know, there are 19 formal discipline cases pending with the AG's office. We monitor about 32 probationers, and 8 of those require drug or alcohol testing, and 6 are in a told status. So the number of cases pending has gone down as Anita and staff have worked those cases, but the number of probationers has gone up. And then I list the disciplinary actions that we have so far for the fiscal year. You can see all the names of the licensees. This is information that's available on our website. And then on the very last page, you have an update of the regulations, the regulatory packages that we're working on. Yes.
So we have an upcoming CASHA convention in the middle of March, and I know that people are going to bombard D&I with the when the speech-language pathology assistant regs will become effective and operative. And I'm not exactly sure what the difference is between effective and operative, but yeah.
Sometimes they become effective, but they, for instance, with fees, they became effective January 1st, but no, they became operative, effective on that date, but they don't become operative until July 1. So operative means that's the date that we'll actually start enforcing that, right?
Right, but with the assistant, those are the regs you were asking about, right?
Yes.
Assistant regs. So there's not an operative; it'll just be an effective date.
Oh, good. Okay.
I don't believe there's not a date
No, I don't think
worked into the regulation that states that it will become operative at a different time. The other thing is that
When will it become effective?
so
That's what it is.
oh, okay, never mind then.
Good news. Those have been completed. The SLIPA.
They are with OAL at this time.
What
So
is-
they're in their final
Right.
approval.
Well, what does that mean? When will they become effective?
Okay, so that depends on when they were. So that depends on first. OAL has 30 calendar days to look them over and to either just approve or disapprove them. Depending on their workload, it generally takes 30 days. Because they look at all of the regs for all the different agencies. And then they work on a quarterly system. So it depends on what day you filed with OAL. So for example, I believe one of the cutoff days is like November 30th, and then those go into effect January 1st.
So it's like quarter.
Yes, so I don't know what date.
Anything that's approved by like the beginning of March will go into effect at the end of March. at the end of that quarter? Something like that.
There's a cutoff date that you have to file them by. I know, for example, November 30th is the cutoff date for your January 1st effective date. Another effective date is March 1st. And then, so it's quarterly.
So it'll be either March
June
1st or
1st.
June 1st? Is that what you're saying, March 1st or June 1st?
Yes, unless they are disapproved.
Okay.
And if they're disapproved,
We'll assume they'll be approved.
then they'll need to come back to the board. Oh, okay, so we got them in January 4th, 2017. So I would imagine that that's
And
in,
I have not heard anything back from OAL.
okay, I would imagine that that's a March effective date, but I can double check that.
Okay. Oh, okay, so effective before the convention. Okay. Thank you.
It just passed another hurdle, and that was approved by Department of Finance. So we're getting there. So that's the last page of my report has to do with regulations, and I think you see that we're making some progress. One of the major rulemaking files that we're working on is disciplinary guidelines. So tomorrow we're going to really have to focus on that and put all our heads together and try to get that the final version of the disciplinary guidelines approved by the board, so that then Kelsey and Karen can work on that and get that package moving. That's actually very important to the board to update our disciplinary guidelines because some time has passed since we've last done that. Now, there are some board reports. If you look behind tab 4C, there is a licensing report there with the number of licenses issued and our overall licensing population numbers. And you can see that our number of total licensees is growing. This year we're looking at 26,000 licensees, so that's going up. It's gone up quite a bit. Any questions so far?
I have a question.
Yes.
So the licenses issued for audiologists took a nosedive in FY 15-16, if I'm reading this report correctly.
Yes.
So why?
Because the number of dispensing audiologists went up.
Okay, but, yeah, and I guess there's a couple of missing data fields there, but I mean, it's gone up from 20 in FY11 to 26 in FY15. So that's not a huge jump. It just.
What number are you looking at?
I'm looking at AU and DAU, comparing FY11 to FY15.
That's one of the points that we made to the legislature, is that we're issuing a large number of licenses, but the overall net increase has been relatively small.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, I mean, total audiologists, again, if I'm reading this correctly, FY11 was 75 and FY15 was 74. Well, again, I may not be reading this correctly. I'm running a total of AU and DAU here and here. So this is 75 in FY11 and 74 in FY15.
But the total population is increasing.
I'm just looking at it's just, okay, yes. All right, that's good.
Yeah.
So, but in licenses issued, I mean, the licensee population, unfortunately, we know that there are people who are retired or maybe even, retired.
Well, I think that's something that we've noted in our discussions recently, that despite the number of licenses that we've issued, averaging, I think the number over the past 5 years was in the 70s, the net increase was relatively low.
Yeah.
So that's not that surprising, and part of the reason is many of these people come from out of state. We're only graduating so many people in the audiology program, so we kind of expect that. But that number has increased. At least we're projecting an increase this coming year.
Okay.
Behind 4D, you have the hearing aid dispensers practical exam statistics. And this is for October.
Sorry, just to jump back, I did find the effective date. It's actually, it's April 1st and filed between December 1st and February 29th.
Okay.
So it would be April 1st if it is approved.
Thank you.
It took me a very long time. OAL has a very complicated webpage. Sorry.
Thank you, we really appreciate it. That will make folks happy at convention.
Behind 4E, you have an enforcement report. There was a question on the number of complaints that we get. We wanted it broken down between, I guess some of the board members are curious what the number breakdown was between speech, language pathology, and audiology, the number of complaints, the number of convictions. So if you looked at, just to give you an example, it is actually difficult to pull this information because we're actually having to go and do it manually. The database doesn't break it down, and the only reason it's broken down for hearing aid dispensing and on the speech side is because those were two separate databases that were set up that way. I think in the future, once we get to a newer database, all the information will probably be compiled. So just to kind of give you some information, the number of complaints received on the speech and audiology side through Q2, 22 of those complaints were for speech language pathology and 5 complaints on the audiology side. The second row there is convictions received. So those are subsequent arrest reports that we get. A lot of times those are like maybe a driving while intoxicated arrest. Just if you look at that number, the second row through the second quarter, it's 48 convictions were received on the speech and audiology side, and 47 of those were on the speech language pathology side and 0 on the audiology side.
You guys. We like you guys. Good.
It just means that audiologists don't drink.
Apparently, yeah. It's a stressful job.
You know, just for your curiosity, I'll share some more numbers. If you go to the second page, if you go to the second page, we have the number of Attorney General cases. So these are the cases that have gone to formal discipline. Of the 7 cases that are pending at the AGs, 5 of those are on the speech and on the speech side, and 2 of those are on the audiology side. Those are the cases that are already pending. The number of accusations that we have filed in the first 2 quarters of fiscal year, both of those were on the speech side. So what else I have? The number of new probationers, 3 of those were on the speech side, 1 was on the audiology side. So most of those are going to be on the speech side because proportionally it's a much larger number. The total population, the population on just speech language pathologists alone is going to be anywhere from 15 to 17,000, and audiology is going to be about 1/10 of that. And that doesn't even include speech language pathology assistants and doesn't factor in RPEs. And that's your enforcement report. Are there any other questions regarding the work that we're doing in the office? Anything else, Brianne, that I'm forgetting?
I have a question. Sure. So does the department view more enforcement cases is better? Is it just sort of it is what it is, or do you feel that there is an expectation that there will be a steady population of enforcement cases or a growth in enforcement cases, or is there really no judgment on that at all?
Well, I think there's a lot of factors involved. For instance, certain professions will have more complaints. So it really just varies. You may be a licensing board for a profession that gets 1,000 complaints a year versus another profession that gets 50 complaints or 20 complaints. So I think the important thing isn't the quantity of enforcement cases or the amount of enforcement work that we're doing, but it's the diligence in how we practice it. If our staff are not on the ball, if our staff are not on their toes, then, things can slip through the cracks, and that's what we never want to happen. We make consumer protection, our number one priority. So we spend a lot of time doing that throughout the day.
I guess to ask the question in a different way, if a board had no enforcement cases, would the legislature say, hey, you don't need to have a board because there's no enforcement cases?
Well, I think that certainly would maybe raise some concerns if there was if you were noticing that there's no enforcement work being done. Another factor is the number of complaints that are coming in and what actions are happening as a result of those complaints. If you're getting, for instance, 200 complaints a year and nothing's happening, then there's some questions to be asked. Or why are consumers complaining and yet there's no action as a result of it? So you do want to see some understanding. Sometimes every complaint obviously doesn't result in discipline. Sometimes it's just educating people. Sometimes it can be a number of things, as we've talked about in the past. That's all I have.
Thank you, Paul. We will now go in public comment. We will now go into closed session.
This is the last item today.
Probably not. I think we'll come back after this discussion. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
somebody, Dee, can you call me again?
Yes,
Okay.
number's right here.
I'm one floor away.
Into open session for the Speech Language Pathology, Audiology, and Hearing Aid Dispenser Board. And our next item is item number 6, which is a memorandum from Paul Sanchez. Take it away, Paul.
Let me find my place here. I just wanted to.
You don't need to use the mic anymore.
If the lady, she's not.
Okay.
I saw her outside. Maybe she doesn't know.
Is
Okay,
she gone for the day? Okay.
we'll just put it here for us.
Thank you. Well, I'm not loud.
I just wanted to keep the board updated on the sunset review process. You have the memo before you. Just to let you know that we put the report together. You should have all received the report by now. It's a very detailed report, pretty extensive. I started getting questions, some preliminary questions on the report, and I expect to hear from the committee consultants in the next week. We have our hearing scheduled on March 6th, and the hearings are going to start at 9 a.m. There will be other regulatory boards there, probably some rather large boards. So I don't know exactly when we will be going on and making our presentation. There's a bit of an outline they provided us. We had this as a placeholder because we thought by now we might have some questions or some issues to discuss, but those issues haven't been presented to us yet at this point. I do ask that those last couple weeks in February that you make yourself available in case we need your help. We're going to have to really scramble and put some information together rather quickly. So this is an opportunity to make some good positive changes.
Do you think that we would need to have a telephonic board meeting to discuss, or are you just going to go sort of one person at a time?
I think it may just be, I just may need help with specific responses, so we may not need to have a whole board meeting.
Paul, could you give us a couple examples of the questions that were asked?
I was asked questions about the board, like budget questions, for instance, questions about our staffing, questions about our licensing timeframes. They were initial questions seeking clarification on the actual report itself. And then I've had some follow-up questions since then, and they're just more like questions about the board structure.
So it's really about process and the business of the board.
Yes, and I would expect to get questions regarding the issues that we've raised, or any issues that were raised in a previous sunset review that maybe the board hasn't completely addressed.
I had a quick question. So we have this A through E about the organization of your presentation. So D's is comment by professional individuals, groups, or associations. Are you going to invite some groups who would be beneficial for us to attend this meetings? For example, CAA and CASHA, will you invite folks to come?
Well, we put the information out there on our interested parties list. I imagine that the committees get in touch with the professional organizations themselves. Is that correct, Vanessa? Are you contacted by the
We've been
by the
contacted.
sunset committees, or do you guys just come voluntarily?
We would be coming voluntarily.
Okay.
That's what I was thinking. So I'm just wondering if you could shoot out some email reminders to make sure that, for sure, that CAA and CASHA show up.
Well, I might just inform them of the process, let them know. I think we did send something out there recently.
Yeah, and I feel as if both CAA and the CASHA advocates would be looped in on all of this.
Yeah, I'm positive there. We'll circle back to them.
Makes me nervous. Just want to make sure that they come there and talk about how, how much they appreciate the board, blah, 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 blah.
Okay. And let me know if there's anybody in particular that you want me to get hold of. I do try to keep in touch. I do try to keep in touch with all of the different representatives, lobbies.
The lobby's the executive director.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have the actual memo from the consultant, from the committee consultant, and there is, there's nothing else on item number 7.
Well, before we move on to the
Yeah, they were together, so does anybody have any questions from the board before we go to public comment? Okay.
Is there public comment or questions on agenda item number 6? Hearing none, let's go to item 7, which is discussion and possible action regarding sunset review responses.
So number 7 was included in number 6, so we don't have anything.
Sounds really familiar. Okay. Item number 8, variable term waiver. And this is yours, isn't it, Dee?
Yes, it is.
Do you have good news for us?
The goal was that we would send out one sheet and one time only, not a bunch of misses coming from the California Department of Education. So at this point, we are now trying to get our heads wrapped around slippers, because one of the issues that we want to address with these people is, do you know the difference between an SLP and an SLPA? Do you know under the terms under which you would be hiring these people? So what we talked about when I was talking with Terry was, let's get this SLPA issue taken care of. The BTW, I think the SLPAs and the misuse of SLPAs right now is more important than the BTW.
Yeah.
So I told her, we are working on that. As soon as we have that piece done, then we will come back and deal with the BTW and come up with the one sheet that will go out to all of the school districts.
So what is the plan as far as the misuse of slippers goes? So
Well, it's what we're working on, Patty. What is the job of a slip? How are slippers trained? It's multiple ways, and we have a new online way to become a slipper with your BA or your.
what I mean is, what's the group doing? I mean, what is your plan?
They are waiting to find out what we're doing with the slippers, because they have nothing to do with slippers. CTC has nothing to do with slippers. They're hired in the schools, they're hired by the schools, but they're well aware of the fact that they are out there. They have no jurisdiction over them. But when we talked about what can we let them know about SLP and how they're trained, slippers, and the BTW, because the BTW is part of this, then one sheet will go out addressing all three.
So I guess I'm still confused. So what is happening right now then? I mean, I guess I'm not sure.
They aren't doing anything. They're waiting for us to come up with what it is that is, how a slipper is trained. What we're going to address in that letter is how are the individuals trained? How is an SLP trained? How is a slipper trained? And what is the training a BTW should have if you're going to hire them into your school district? So those are.
So who's doing this letter? That's what I guess I'm confused about.
William Hamtrick and I can't remember her name at CDE, Terry Clark and myself.
Okay.
We'll write the one page.
Got it. Okay.
Are you also addressing, I mean, I can just see it, that there's going to be all sorts of supervision questions. What can they do?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
what is the character of supervision? And we've been down this road a few times, not necessarily with slippers, but other things, where it's, do they have to be in the same building, in the same room? Do they have to
Following
pre-approve it?
this right here, following our regs.
Well, I'm just
And-
reading it, and it's not clear to me from, let's see, providing direct treatment assistance to patients or clients under the supervision of an SLP. Well, what does that mean? Are they literally looking over their shoulder? Are they somewhere on the premises? Did they leave them with the plan and went off to the other school district where they work? What's the nature of that?
I think, Brianne, we have a conference call. Patty's going to be in on it the 20th,
I'm
22nd.
talking about it next on the agenda. Yeah.
Okay, well, Patty will address that, and in that phone call, we're trying to get a clear picture of how slippers are trained. And it is not just at the community college level, but it is, you can get a BA and go out and get your 100 hours, you become a slipper. And most recently, there's a 9-week, 100-hour training that you pay $9,000 for, and you can become a slipper. One of my students did it,
Wow.
and she had no idea. They sent them out. It's up to them to go out and find their supervisor. She had no idea. She just went and said, "Can you supervise me?" And the answer was yes. Did you know to ask her, "Have you been trained? Do you meet the criteria to be a supervisor?"
Well, even if they did, I can just see it begs that question.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. It absolutely does.
And
And
this doesn't
that's,
say.
we're trying,
So I know that's what you're trying to.
yeah.
Actually, no, that's not what the discussion is about, but,
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about, but I'm adding in that I think this is going to come back and bite you if you don't address it.
If we don't address it. I'm quite sure my students, and I'm not going to pursue it with her, I would love to know what happened during those 100 hours. Because she was the one who went out and made the arrangements.
and
She did the $100, or she did the $100 for the $9,000. And immediately 5 other students signed up to go do it. But they had no information. They received nothing from me while they were going through that post-bac program. They just found out about this online program. They had the money, and by the way, she was hired immediately in the school.
No, I'm not saying that.
She was hired immediately, which is a concern to Terry. You know, wow, we've got somebody out there. Do we know that they were really well trained?
Are there lots of online slipper programs? Or I only know of one in California.
I don't think there's a lot of them. This one is strictly to get the 100 hours.
So the
that-
programs are listed on our board website.
Yeah, we have, I think, about 5 bachelor's field, well, I have them in here. One out of the 5 is online.
Loma Linda's the one.
No, I think that's
So remember,
No, oh, the
excuse me,
one that you're arguing.
I have to interrupt. Remember, no microphone, so I need the voices a little louder, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we have we have 4 fieldwork approved programs for SLPAs in California. What that means is that these are students who completed a bachelor's degree in communicative disorders. So they're not going to a 2-year college to get their SLPA, but rather they've completed an undergraduate major in communicative disorders. And so what they need to do now is complete field work. And we have North.
Excuse me, Patty, since this goes into the next topic, maybe we should just
Yeah.
go into that and ask if there's any public comment on
Yeah,
the,
okay.
on the
That's an action.
other topic.
Okay, so
But they
is-
do melt.
Yeah, they do.
It melts.
public comment on the credential variable term waiver and supervision of speech language pathology assistance report. Can we just go seamlessly, or do we have to?
There's nothing really to
Good,
do.
thank you. Okay, so Patty, can you continue discussing, or can you discuss the approval process for SLPA training programs?
Yeah, it's actually kind of separate from this topic, but just to reiterate what we started saying, we don't have listed whether these fieldwork approved programs are online or not. But I know that Northridge has both an in-person and an online fieldwork approved program. Sac State is an in-person program. Chapman is an in-person program. And you said Loma Linda's online.
Yes.
Okay, so that's, at any rate, so this topic is actually a little bit different. How this came about is a community college contacted Brianne about a desire to apply to provide a SLPA training program in 2018. So that's really how this all came about. And the program and the community college requested information about the approval process because we approve SLPA programs at the board level. So as it happens, Brianne did some research and discovered that the most recent SLPA program was approved by the board before the employment of any of the current staff. And when she tried to find information about the records of how prior staff went about approving programs, she couldn't find any.
What year was that?
I don't know. Maybe Brianne knows.
This week I've been on the board 6 years, so.
It was
Nothing
more than 6
More
years
than
ago.
6 years ago.
That's what I would say. More than 6 years ago was the
Uh-huh.
last time that a SLPA program was approved by the board. So as a result, Dee and I have now formed a committee consisting of ourselves and Brianne, and we've invited 2 coordinators of SLPA programs to join us. One is Susan Kidwell, she's from Delta College, and the other is Christina Zajic. She's from American River College. Both are near Sacramento.
Yeah.
And the purpose of this committee will be to develop guidelines and processes for approving new SLPA programs. So it's not really what Dee is talking about. It's really a completely separate issue. So the follow-up is that we're going to be having a phone conference on February 20th. And what we and I emailed a bunch of documents to everybody to help prepare for this phone conference, and we also anticipate that we'll be able, fortunately actually, to have a face-to-face meeting at the CASHA convention, which is taking place between March 16th and 19th. Brianne, I don't think would be able to attend because it's in Pasadena, but yeah. But the rest of us will be there. But you know what? You could phone in. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So she can attend via phone.
All
We'll be face to face. You'll be on the phone.
Come on to
Approved.
Pasadena.
There we go. So it's a little bit different than what we were talking about. This is really an approval process for the programs. On the other hand, I've taken a look at the documents. Since I have time today, I can look at the documents in advance. And it's interesting, there is clearly some variability in the community college programs and the coursework that's required. to get an AA degree with a major as a slip up. Not surprisingly, there's some variability, but there is. And something interesting. So that's the retard. Okay. Did you want to add anything? No. Okay.
Although that is one thing that Marie pointed out, are the community college programs consistent? And they're not.
And there aren't any written standards from the professional
No, but so
organization.
many of them are in the schools.
Well, no, there are definitely information from ASHA about what knowledge, what skills and knowledge a slipper should
But not
have.
like
But
not
not
like
a-
a curriculum or
no,
something like that.
no. Just a listing of knowledge,
Right,
knowledge,
knowledge,
bullets,
KSTs or whatever, yeah.
bullets of what knowledge
Right.
and skills should
Rock
exist,
knowledge skills.
but not a curriculum. So.
Just, Patty, you mentioned that there were several people on your committee. Yeah, we probably need to just huddle, get together and talk about what that board will consist of and make sure that we're complying with the Beck-McKean Act.
Okay.
Because there are rules for advisory boards and public notice rules.
Oh, for a committee.
Yes.
But this would be, isn't this a committee?
If it's just a committee
This is
of-
a CASHA
of-
committee, right? Or is it a?
No, it's
No,
a-
or is it a
Yeah.
board committee?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
there's-
very important business, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, yeah, the actual rules on advisory committees, if it's created by the board or by a member of the board, it doesn't matter the membership necessarily of the board, but if it's 3 or more people, it does need to be noticed. So even
we
if
need
it's
to
3,
notice it.
even if it's 3 people not on the board, it does need to be noticed. So we can discuss that, and get the proper protocols in place.
Are we going to be able to do that February 20th? Is that enough time for notice?
So you need 10 days,
Okay,
so.
well, right now.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh,
Woo.
We're gonna get working.
Okay.
We'll talk, we may need to postpone. We'll try our best to get it.
Okay. All right. What that we talked about?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe we could get the 2 down south included if we waited longer. So that the 4 real active programs, the 4 real active slip-up programs,
You're talking about
Orange Coast and Santa Ana.
Yeah.
And actually Cerritos too.
Yeah, I mean, the larger the committee gets, the harder it is
Okay.
to do stuff.
All right. But I
Just
would
a
like to
background
know, how do we find out then if there is consistency in the programs?
Well, I've got all the
And they-
curriculum. You have all the curriculum. You have the curriculum.
Just a bit of background. This approval process was done with the work of a subject matter expert. So we do know like what was done, and we have records of what was done. What we don't know is the process that was used or the structure. We think sometimes when you have an expert, they handle it and they have criteria, but that wasn't really something that we were able to nail down. So we wanted to put some structure to this process, make sure that it's consistent and follows the regulations that are in place.
Yeah, for sure.
So since the time it was started, nobody has reviewed the curriculum or looked for that type of consistency in the colleges that are offering the AA. I mean, CTC would come in and look at it and actually would accredit, but are these 5 programs doing the same thing?
I have no idea, and I have been contacted by an existing SLIPA program that has asked the question. We've made some changes to our SLIPA program.
That's my concern.
That's what we need to have.
Right.
That's my concern. Look
And
at
that's,
that
and that's
timeline.
exactly
Wow.
why we're having this conversation, because they came to us
With-
and wanted to talk to us about that. We have authority to
All right.
review, to inspect, so that's something that we want to make sure that we're doing.
Then it should be all the programs, shouldn't it? I mean, that there's not just 2.
Yes, but I think initially what we're trying to look at right now is the approval process.
Yeah.
So once we have the
Oh,
approval
yeah.
process, kind of the framework behind it, we can then look
Right.
at other.
But eventually we
other
will look at
procedures.
all.
Yes.
So
Okay.
then, Brianne, so the last one that was approved more than 6 years ago, was the approval, is that like sort of a lifetime approval, or was there a renewal on the approval? Or
It's my understanding it's a lifetime approval. So once it's blessed by the board and approved, then they're good to go. But then, like Paul said, we have it in statute or regulation where we can go do a site visit, do an evaluation, and we probably should, especially if we've already noticed some inconsistencies amongst the community colleges.
So you do have in regulation, you do have the ability to revoke, but you don't really have parameters for that.
So there aren't set standards for
It
it.
just says the letter of approval shall be returned to the board when the program's approval has been revoked.
Okay, so we don't have standards.
I guess the standards would be that they have to fall within all the requirements and all of that kind of stuff. But in terms of process, you don't have anything set in place in regulation as per.
We have a lot to discuss, actually.
Yeah.
We do, and this is why staffing. I hate to sound like a broken record, but this is why staffing is so important. Sometimes you don't even know what you don't know or what you lack unless you have the staff that are there to review those things and look at those things. This is where, hey, look at this regulation. I'm not sure that we're meeting this requirement or this requirement. So those are things that we are aware of. We're looking at that, but we do need staff so that we don't have to rely on a contracted person, on volunteers or subject matter experts as it has been done in the past. We need to actually have that. That's very important. It needs to be staffed, and we have somebody that's doing this on a regular basis. So
That's kind of eye-opening. I mean, the whole discussion, the whole idea that we did this and then we don't have like standards or records or a blueprint to follow.
And Allison, that's the concern of the people at CTC. They have no jurisdiction over this, and yet they're working under SLPs, or they are, as Terry said, in our buildings.
Yeah.
They're functioning, but is there consistency to the education and to the practice?
Yeah. That's fascinating in a frightening sort of way.
Well, yeah, what's interesting is that typically there is some type of review process in place. Every X number of years, there's a review process in place to make sure that the program is continuing to meet our regulations or our statutes. And that does not exist. And also that's a time-consuming process as well. That's like audit. It's an audit. It's a formal audit.
It's like going through a reaccreditation.
It's right. That's exactly what it is. I was trying not to put it that way, but so I'm likening it to an audit. But if we're licensing them, we should be, for approving them as a program, there should be some follow-up.
And just another bit of information, I did reach out to some other boards, other agencies that actually do this type of work. Bureau of Private, Post-Secondary, and I asked them just to come and take a look at what we were doing. We wanted to provide some structure because I wasn't able to get that kind of help. So that's when I talked to Brianna and I said, I think we just need to actually build this thing ourselves from the ground up. Again, I don't want to mislead you and lead you to believe that we don't have any documentation. We have documentation. The problem is we don't have a process in place, procedures, structure. We have some historical documents that we can look at, but that alone isn't going to tell us how to do this. So we want to make sure that we nail that down and have some good, solid protocols.
And with that in mind, because I wasn't aware that we had historical documents, can you scan them or mail some of that information to us if it's not confidential? I don't know what you mean by documents.
Well, I can talk to you about what they are. It's mostly correspondence that I've read. That's what it wasn't very helpful to me just reading some of the correspondence. But there are some historical documents. We'd have to do some probably gathering of those documents next time we help me review.
Along the lines of standards in each of the areas, or do they have standards written up for the coursework and the practicums and
standards from the applicants?
No,
for the
the community colleges that are offering these programs, do they have the set of standards by which they can judge how is the program doing?
You're right. You're talking about the program that was applying for approval. Did they
the
present
existing-
standards? I don't
Right.
think there was any, I don't think there was a
right.
consistent way in how it was all presented.
Okay.
So we could probably. look at
There
some of
should
that.
be standards now, which, and would feed into, because one way that our students do become SLPs is through the SLPA, and they get used to standards, they go through ASHA, and
Well, we have regulations and statutes.
we have regulations and statutes.
That's
Have
what we
they,
have.
my question is, have they followed them consistently?
Yeah.
The phrase can of worms comes to mind.
It does, it
Yeah.
really and truly
Oh, my goodness.
does.
Yeah.
Because and that other programs can come in and all of a sudden open up something, and the students found it and raced to it because it's good money. And the other thing is, this was intended to be a career. The person who designed this did it because they realized other professions have the assistants, and we need assistants as well. And it was designed to be a career, a distinct career path. You go and you become a slip-up. It's now become, as one person said, it's a stopgap to get you in through grad school.
Right.
Everybody's getting the slip-up because now that'll pay for them to go through grad school.
Yeah.
And that was not the intent. This was really an intent to want to be a slip-up. And these are people who don't want to be a slip-up. They want to be an SLP.
Sure, yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Dee, the program you're referring to, is that a board-approved school, or is that, I'm not clear on what that is.
The
program
online
that's
one?
charging $9,000?
Loma Linda. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, they are.
Okay.
They are on the list.
I
Yes,
see. Okay.
very definitely. hmm That's what my students said.
So that's from, I'm sorry, field work experience? Is that what
That is for the 100 hours of field.
Okay, so we do have regulations in place for that. It says that a board-approved program shall not utilize agencies and or community facilities for field work experience without prior program approval by the board. So, I don't know if that's necessary. So it sounds like the field work experience should also be approved by the board as well. So, does that make sense?
It is though, they are one of our field approved programs.
They are.
They are a field approved program, yeah.
They are.
Yeah, it's right outside of the
Is it?
It says, she said it's right.
Is there any further comments from the board?
Oh, yeah, okay. No, but this is gonna take some time.
Yeah, it is.
That's what I did say. It's
It
gonna
is.
take some time.
Okay,
Public comment?
is there any more public comments? Hearing none, we will adjourn until, what time are we starting tomorrow morning, 9? Yes. Okay, we will adjourn to, until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, and starting with item number 10.
Not like the number 9.
I'm sorry, no, I think we just did 9. Yep.
We've done 9.
See you at 10.
Oh.
We were just getting 10 and start with 11.
Yeah.
Okay, are we going out of order tomorrow?
Right, well, I don't know.
Tomorrow we start at 10.
Okay, wait.
Yes, we're on 10.
now.
Okay. By the way, what was the result of this
Check.
decision?
It's still open.
I'm sorry?
It's still open.
Oh,
Should I close now?
so-
Yes, we are adjourned, yes.